I want him giving all my introductions, you know? That's just great. Good morning, everyone. Cool. Oh, you guys are ready. Cool. Okay, so about 10 years ago, we're having a conversation, and you wouldn't hear this out of the speaker's mouth. I want you to turn your devices on. Okay. So, turn them on. Turn your phones on. You're going to be using them. Because today's conversation is not just about technology in general, but it's about an issue near and dear to our industry, and that's internet connectivity. It's what's really changed about how we do our meetings. So let's take a look, if we can. Now, I always use different tools, and I might talk about the one I'm using today, but I want to start with a pair of polls. The way this will work is you will text 2 times. Both times you're going to text to 22333. And once we get the polls set up, then we'll talk about the service itself. So the first question on the left side is, do you test bandwidth on a site inspection? And if you're on the hotel side, you can apply the same way as it does on the planner side. So if your answer is yes, your message would be 56068. If your answer is no, 56094. And if your answer is what's bandwidth, which is probably why you're here, 56457. So that's the first poll you're going to do. Once you've done that one, text again to 22333 for the second question. And that is, do you negotiate connectivity costs in your contracts? Yes would be 186306. No would be 186308. And the question, I can do that, is 186310. We'll take a look at the answers in about a minute or so, but before we do, let's talk tools, because I'm a geek and I like to share this stuff. Interactivity in the point of a session is a critical thing. So what I'm using here is a low-tech tool that's called Poll Everywhere. And hopefully some of you do use this at your events, but it allows you to do real-time text polling from the smartphone of the attendee. It doesn't take any integration into apps. It doesn't take anything other than the text ready to go. What's cool about it is that it plays in what's called a freemium space. And freemium means it's free to try. And if you want the additional functionality, the additional bells and whistles, there'll be a premium price point, typically a subscription fee. But you can use this for up to 40 people at as many polls as you want at no cost. So for smaller meetings or to test it out, it's freemium. So let's take a look. So we got, hopefully, a couple of polls here. Haven't seen any results coming in yet, gang. So let's see what we got. 22333. Nope, haven't seen anything. So let's see. Okay, try it again, and that would be completely my fault. But let's see if this is somehow deactivated. We're going to make this work, and if we don't, we're going to move on with it. So again, first poll, 22333. Do you test bandwidth on a site visit? Second, the numbers are different. Then let's do it this way. Did I tell you I hate technology sometimes? I mean, really, really hate technology. So let's start it all over again. First poll, 22333. Yes, 59240. No, 59242. What's bandwidth? 59244. I see results coming in. It means 2 words. User error. Me. By the way, I hope you all give me room to fail with technology today, because I do want to push the envelope. I want to push the envelope in a lot of different ways, and you'll see one of them, and we'll talk about that at some point. But we got about 31 results. So before we show that one, let's scoot over to the other poll. Negotiate connectivity costs in your contract. So yes, 59245. No, 59246, and didn't know I could do that. 59255. We'll keep it there for a second. Now, it's going to be interesting to see where you're at in this conversation, because if I asked a very basic question, which was, is the internet an important part of the meeting experience at your event, it would probably be 100% yes, or at least 95% yes. Far different than just a few years ago. But I think how we're managing and how we're dealing with the expectations of the internet really has changed the game. So let's start with number 1. Do you test bandwidth on a site inspection? What do you think? Yes? No? Yes. Really? Okay, let's find out. We're going to go with this one first because I'm obviously having user error. Okay, so you negotiate connectivity. It's sort of 2 to 1. When we include the no's, it's even more than that. That 12 there is really 21 people no. So you're not really negotiating connectivity. So we don't kill the time that we're on. We're going to do the first poll as a show of hands. So how many of you actually test bandwidth? So not even a third of you test bandwidth, but at least half of you are negotiating it. I got to scratch my head on that one. So if you're not testing it, can you answer this question for me? What are you negotiating? You see, the problem that we have with this conversation is that the terminology is a little bit different than what we're comfortable with, and there's an awful lot of misinformation out there. So we're going to move the conversation into understanding basic terms. So, can anybody give me a definition for bandwidth? You hear it all the time. Okay, the ability to connect services, and even in a simpler way, bandwidth is very, very basic. It's the speed of your connection. It's the amount of data that can be transferred. It's the one thing that everyone focuses on when we're talking about the internet. How much bandwidth do you have? And the geeks make it difficult because they have bytes and bits and they're two different things. And I'm not going down that path because that would be another hour to explain that. But understand that when they talk about it, there's a speed. More speed, the better your connection. In fact, we're going to show you how to test it at a hotel, at a convention center, in your home before we're done. But that's number one. So bandwidth deals about speed, but it's not the only thing you need to talk about. So I don't mess up again on the poll. Let's do a show of hands here. So we are a creature of reports and forums and postcons and RFPs. So the question is simple. Do you actually include bandwidth and internet data on your RFP process or your postcon? Just show of hands, how many people do that? There's about 5 hands at tops going up here. Let me just ask the other question, which is how many of you use the internet at all at a conference? And every hand goes up. Well, do you share food and beverage? Do you share heads and beds? Yeah, we do. Because if we didn't give that to our partners on the hotel side, guess what? How are they going to know what you need? Yet we expect them to provide bandwidth for us and connectivity, and we're not telling them what. Shame on us. By the way, I'm going to be an equal opportunity annoyer today because I plan to annoy both planners and suppliers in this conversation because we have to find that middle ground that works for us all. So bandwidth, speed, that's one. Term 2 is, well, even before we get to that, terms about how you check bandwidth. Because you go to a hotel like this, and if I was still planning meetings, I think about it from 4 perspectives. For example, I think about it from the perspective of the guests. I think about it from the perspective of the conference. I think about it from the perspective of my office. And there's 2 ways we can look at that. We can look at that as either being a shared approach. Boy, my connectivity is absolutely failing today. There we go. Guest room. So, shared, so that everybody's using bandwidth, or is it dedicated to a particular room? The answer there would be shared. Hotel says they have 25 meg, don't worry what it means, but 25 meg of bandwidth. That's allocated to all the rooms in the hotel. The more people staying at the hotel, ideally, the less that everyone's going to get. Now, I do have an issue. This is my annoying the suppliers for a second. Hotels have this tendency to do this. They'll offer it to you for free in the hotel room, but if you want an upgrade, you can pay for it, right? And I'm cool with that with one problem. They don't let me test. They don't let me really see whether I need that. They just tell me it's for video and high speed and stuff like that. Would you buy something sight unseen? Well, you do with internet if you do that. You're paying $14.95 per night or whatever they're charging, if they're charging. And you might not even need it. So, number one, guest room, it's shared. Number two, me, up in the front of the room, your friendly geek up here, the presentation services. Do you want your speakers on a shared network? You better say no really quickly, because if you do, then you're setting your speaker and probably your job security up for a lot of conversation. It is clearly a dedicated type of tool. How much bandwidth? I'll give you an idea in a couple minutes. I'm going to show you a tool that works perfectly. Your office, event operations. You want that shared? No, of course you don't. That's dedicated as well. And lastly, your attendees, or where you are right now. Shared or dedicated? Shared. It's going to be shared. How much? There's the rub. Just curious, how many of you right now are on the Wi-Fi network here? Okay, that's good to know, because it's going to affect how much speed you all get. But bandwidth, this is sort of the closure on the first conversation, the first definition. It's the speed of the internet, and it's either going to be shared or dedicated based on how it's being used. But that's not the only thing you need to know, because then there's the IP request. IP, Internet Protocol. What does it mean? Well, simple definition on an IP request is the number of times a device visits a web page. And this is what the geeks in the hotel and the center are actually counting. How many IP requests? So, if everybody in here is on Wi-Fi, there's one IP request per person, right? No, because you got multiple devices. You got an I or an Android phone and a tablet. You may have a wearable, which is going to change the game again in a few years. And all that is part of this process. In fact, when I get to a hotel, one of the things I always want to find out is how many IP requests they can accommodate in a specific room. Now, if this was a ballroom, I might be able to look up in the ceiling and see what looks like a little fire alarm, but it very well might be a router that will give the amount of connections needed in that room. So if we're in this room and they know it can seat 100 people and they can accommodate 100 requests, is that enough? No, it's not. It's not enough. Now, people have a hard time with IP and how the internet works. And understand, I'm a boomer. I'm 56. I didn't grow up with the internet, so even though I'm a geek, this still blows me away. But there's a great video I want to show you. We're going to stop it once or twice. That sort of simplifies this conversation, this IP request. So let's take a look at how a packet, a piece of information, would get from an organization to its conference. And it's from an organization called the World Science Festival, so obviously they have a lot of geeks on their staff, which is a good thing. But hopefully this will make this a simpler explanation.
Have you ever wondered what happens when someone in England visits the World Science Festival's webpage? First, their computer needs to ask the World Science Festival server for a copy of that webpage. The computer sticks this request into a virtual envelope called a packet, wrapped with specific information about that request.
We're going to stop that right there. So, you're at home and you're streaming a Netflix, right? And all of a sudden, a little piece of the screen gets fuzzy. Ever see that happen? What happens is that movie is actually being sent in small chunks of information. Those chunks are called packets. When it gets to your computer, the computer loses a few of those packets. How that actually manifests itself is that lack of clarity on the screen. If enough of them get really funky and fuzzy, then you won't be able to see the movie, or the baseball game, or the football game, whatever you're streaming. A packet of information. Let's continue.
Including the World Science Festival's IP address.
There's IP. 4 numbers. You never have to know that, but every time you type in www.google.com, that's what the computer actually understands. And that's how they send this information out.
The computer sends this packet out of the house and below the street via large underground copper wires. It passes through small regional networks before ending up here at Telehouse North in London. Telehouse North is England's main internet hub. The IP address on this packet tells the hub that the World Science Festival server is actually in Los Angeles. So Telehouse North sends the packet out as light across the Atlantic. over fiber optic cables buried deep beneath the ocean. The packet ends up here, 60 Hudson Street, New York City, the largest internet hub on the East Coast. This hub sends the packet through a series of regional networks connecting New York to Los Angeles, where the World Science Festival server resides. The server reads the request and gets ready to send the web page to England. But web pages made up of images and text are too large to send as a single packet of data. So how do we get it back to England? Imagine a group of 5,000 tourists visiting New York City in a single gigantic tour bus. They are way up in Harlem, but they want to visit the Statue of Liberty before it closes. But it's rush hour on a Friday. There's no way that giant bus is going to fit through those crazy congested streets. So they decide to get off the bus and spread out. Some take the subway, some take cabs, a few rent bikes, and some even take kayaks down the Hudson River.
Stop. I live in New York City. Nobody kayaks down the Hudson River, okay? We'll just get that straight here. But you see, the problem is that all this information has to get through, and it has to get through all at the same time. That's the challenge here, is that this connectivity is in here, but it has to be able to leave here. It has to hit the Google or Facebook or your email. Hopefully you're not doing that right now, but you might be, and that's cool. Or even worse, downloading YouTube video. Now understand, video is a huge bandwidth problem because it takes a lot. So all of a sudden in your event, your speaker's putting a few people to sleep, and they click on a YouTube video, and they're actually stealing connectivity, in theory, for a lot of other people. It's why you need more. You can't really stop them from doing that, but it's why you need more than you think. The rest of this, they talk about kayaking down the Hudson River, and we won't go there. Okay, fine. So IP request. Just understand that every internet address, your conference page, YouTube video has a unique address, and every time you're asking to get that information, you're making a request. Now, as we said, IP request is okay if everybody only has one device. Ain't the case. Because you got your iPhone, you got your iPad, you might have a laptop, you might have a wearable. And digital density is the terminology that's out there now that essentially says the number of devices, not people, that need access. 3 terms I really think is all we need to know here. We need to understand the speed, that's the bandwidth. We need to understand the number of requests that the facility can accommodate in a given room, that's the IP. And we need to understand how many devices your group is coming in with. That's the density. That's as simple as we can make this conversation. Everything else is uber geeky. But if you have information on these 3 things, which before we finish you will, then you're going to be able to intelligently have the conversation. So you go into site inspection. So what am I checking? I'm checking the lobby and the public space. I want to know, outside of registration for the hotel, typically internet's free, that's cool. I want to see how fast it is. I'm clearly checking the meeting rooms. And if you don't do that, we'll give you a tool in a few minutes to do that. There's a bunch of them out there, all free of charge. And on top of that, there's the guest room. So 3 things I need to focus on. The speed in the public area, least important, and the speed in the meeting rooms and the guest rooms. Simple so far? Straightforward, right? Cool. So let's give you a couple of tools. Now understand this is a snapshot in time. But if you want to test the bandwidth in any particular area, there is an app, also a web page, called Speed Test. And I strongly recommend that any one of these type of tools, you have at least one of them. Let's show you how it works. Because here is the speed test online. And what I'm going to do is hit the test again button. 3 pieces of information are going to come up. The first one, the ping, don't worry about it. I'm not even going to go there. And it might take milliseconds to get there. That download speed, that's what you're looking for. Right now, in my computer on a hardwire, it's 7 meg. What does that mean? That means I'm fine. That means I could stream video. That means I could do my presentation without a hiccup. What's the minimum you need? This is an arguable point. The hotel, the AV company, will tell you 1 meg. Don't believe them. 3 to 5 megs. Why? Because the internet speed isn't consistent. It wavers. So if it wavers around 1 meg, it's going to drop. And what you're going to lose? You're going to lose packets of information. Your CEO's video is going to hiccup. Don't want that to happen. If you got 3 to 5 meg, you got wiggle room in there. If you got more, cool. Upload speed, again, not really for us to worry about that much, but if you were sending big files to Dropbox, or if you have a presentation services system where all the PowerPoints are in one area, that's where upload speed matters. But for 95% of us, we need to focus just on one thing, that download speed. Now, it is a snapshot. It is a point in time. I'm going to test it again, and the number can be different. Now, I'm going to hardwire. Other thing planners and suppliers both need to know. No matter what the geeks tell you, a hardwire is a better solution for you. It is more stable, more consistent. I don't care what AV or what the house says. I demand for a speaker a hardwire up there if they have a computer. If they have an iPad or if they're running it from a mobile device, wireless is going to have to do. But I want my bandwidth separated from the room. You don't want your CEO on the same bandwidth as the employee who's bored in the back of the room on YouTube, right? Right. So you can do this test. I got more download speed. It's fickle. This is not necessarily what it's going to be at your meeting. It's what it is right now, and it's a starting point for the conversation. If that came up and you couldn't get that arrow to get past 1 meg, guess what? You got questions to ask right there. And if the hotel says, we got plenty of bandwidth, sorry, hotel, don't believe them. Okay? Test it yourself. They may have plenty of bandwidth, but there might be another group in the hotel with you. Are they using it? Do you know? You don't. Easier for them to partition bandwidth hardwired. They can do it wireless, no question about that. So one app, speed test. Apex, the Convention Industry Council, has a tool that's highly okay. I don't know how else to describe it because it's not great, but it's a first step that our industry has defined. Apex, the Accepted Practices Exchange of the Convention Industry Council, has put together a bandwidth estimator. And essentially, it allows you to put in a number of users, a type of bandwidth, which I think is really interesting because it's meaningless. We're all at a high level right now. So if I had 200 users in here, let's say 230, and everyone's at high, and multiple devices. So are there multiple devices in here? The answer is always yes. Check it, calculate, and now it's going to tell you you need 46 megabits of information. That's so misleading because you're going to go, that's a ton. You got to just divide that by 10, literally 8, but don't go there. The math gets too difficult. Just take 46, 4.6 meg of bandwidth is what you need. It's okay. It's not perfect, but it's a starting point. About a year and a half ago, our industry did. I'm going to take you one better on that, but I want you to know it because ultimately, if you're going for the CMP examination, something like this might be on there, and your awareness of this isn't a bad thing. So we have the estimator. By the way, do you test phone coverage? I do. Coverage, question mark, and indeed that is the name of the app, will tell you how strong the signals are from the 4 major carriers. Now careful on that, it's not going to tell you if you're like in a basement room where everything is blocked because of cement, but it'll tell you how close the towers are. I know there's one hotel, I won't mention names today, maybe, that claims that their hotel is great because there's no connectivity, you're all alone and you don't have to worry about being bothered by cellular connections. Are you okay with that? No, we're not okay with that anymore. Unfortunately, we need to always be connected. And by the way, if you really want to go uber geeky on this, there are apps that allow you to measure room size, both for the Apple and for the Android, so there's lots of tools. But keep it simple. Speed test app, have it. Coverage app. Now you got 2 tools on a site visit that'll take you 30 seconds to figure out, am I in a good connected area? Now here's the great approach. A company by the name of J. Burton and Associates put this together and gave me the okay to share it with everyone. And it is really cool because it'll step you through what you probably need in terms of bandwidth. Here's how it works. It's a worksheet, and you would put up at the top the number of your attendees. So we're saying a 250-person conference here, and they're averaging 1.5 devices a person. I think it might even go to 2 right now, but I'm cool with that. Says that in this room there'd be a total of 375 devices. Those devices, the industry knows that at any given time, 1 out of every 5 of you is using your phone for something. So it's not all being used, but 20% of it is. So that means actively there's maybe 75 devices in here. And they're saying that about half a meg, 425 kilobits per second, is what is used. Why? Because email doesn't take much at all, and downloading Facebook pictures takes a little more, and going to YouTube really is just going to crash the whole system, right? So with that said, this 32 meg is what you need. Divide that by 10, about 3 megabytes of bandwidth. Now we got something more tangible. If you want a copy of this, I'm happy to share my PowerPoint, Joe. I can send it out so you guys can have it. I want you to use this. You can talk to the folks at J. Burton. They've put this together for associations, for corporate, for small market groups. Really good tool. Yet there's still going to be one more that's going to work better, because you have the information, and that's what we got to get to. Okay. If we had all day on this, we'd have a great conversation about connectivity and your concerns. But I'd love to hear from a planner in the room, and by the way, I'm going to ask suppliers in a second for the same thing, to share one of their concerns that they've had, real experience, something they're dealing with right now, about connectivity at a property. Could be great, could be not so great. Anyone want to share? In the back. How do you detect dead spots in a room? You test. You test where it is. Actually, if you really wanted to do this well, and we'll talk a little bit about this later, but when you're doing your site visit and you know you need internet connectivity, I would ask the hotel's IT person to be part of that, because they have mapped out exactly where all of those routers are. I've seen it in hotels. They'll tell you. Hotels confirm this for me if you've actually talked to your IT department, that they know where everything is. They know that they have a router that can handle 100 requests here and 200 requests here and where it's spaced. It's important to understand that you got to test that out room by room or understand that room by room. There's a story that happened in San Francisco about 2 years ago at the Salesforce meeting. And we're talking about 35,000 people, and they have tons of bandwidth, and they were ready for it. What they weren't ready for is understanding where the bandwidth was being used. Because it was great in the general session. And what happens at the end of the session? All the media goes to the media room, where there wasn't a router that can accommodate that. And the bandwidth, the connection, failed. And the media, snarky as they are, got pissy. So what did they do in San Francisco? They went out of the convention center and went to Starbucks to post their stories. Yeah, and you know the first line of the story was how bad the connection was at the facility. And that's the issue of where. You got plenty of bandwidth, but if you don't know how much those areas can coordinate, it's a crapshoot. Great question. So, anyone want to share, good or bad? I know sometimes it's not comfortable, because if you don't want to do it, I can, and I will. So here, go for it.
Just recently had a situation at a hotel where I had 3 different networks to connect to. One in the lobby, one in the guest room, and one in the meeting space.
Yeah, 3 completely different networks. Does that work for you?
No.
No, of course not. What do the hotels say about it?
You know.
That's the way it is. Yeah, you know how it goes.
There's contracts that are currently in place that are preventing hoteliers from working with you on it. It's third party.
Yep. And that's one of the other issues. She mentioned there are contracts in place that prevent the hotels because of the third-party contract. This is an awareness issue for the supplier side as much as the planner side right now, which is those contracts don't actually serve the hotel any good, because of all of a sudden you have client after client with unfulfilled expectations about that. Are they going to want to return? Now, one more comment. Oops, I'm sorry.
A single internet connection from the hotel and connect your own Wi-Fi router to that connection so that your users can access your own Wi-Fi router to the hotel.
The question is there a way to purchase a single Wi-Fi router and have it use yours rather than theirs? There is. Matter of fact, there are companies who will sell you private clouds that you can rent. And I know most financial groups do this because they're really, really focused on the security and the accuracy and the speed. And you will buy this cloud and it will give you more space, more bandwidth than you ever need. It's an expensive proposition, and that's the challenge there. So I don't think it's, for this room, a very viable approach because, you're already spending too much. We'll get to that in a second. So you don't want to get to the point where it's the most expensive thing in your line item on the budget. So, and remember, it's going to be somewhat kind of fairly exclusive. So in some hotels, you can't bring in your own at all. So let's see some of my concerns. Charging for the amount of bandwidth used. I want to puncture a hole right now in the conversation that you hear. Extra bandwidth does not cost you any more from the hotel perspective. There, I said it. You can be mad at me. I don't care. Bandwidth is not charged that way. They get a chunk. They get 50 meg coming to their hotel. It doesn't cost them more to flip that switch to give you more, unless you say it's okay. My biggest pet peeve, and one of a lot of planners. I want you paying a certain amount. By the way, one of the other issues is also that double dipping. You pay for it once, and then you pay for it a second time for a second device, and you pay for it again for a third device. There was a hotel, won't say the name, starts with H, rhymes with riot. Oops, instead of shoot down. Now, when I got to the checkout desk 2 years ago, I had $150 of connectivity because they charged me each device in my room each day. I'm a nice guy. It wasn't pretty. And I really feel bad for the desk clerk at 6 o'clock on that Sunday morning when I was checking out. And she did, to her credit, take all that off there. But really, guys, now, Marriott here, great job. How many devices can you connect at one cost? Anyone check the fine print there? Because it says 6. 6 is great. 6 means I got my phones, I got my iPad, I got my tablets, I got my PC. I'm a geek, I come with a lot of stuff. But if you're sharing a room with someone, it's still going to be good. If I see 3, red flag. Okay, next up, the blind buying. We talked about that earlier. It's that upgrade that you're going to pay for. What am I paying you $14.95 a day for? Do I need it? Hotels, very clear question here. Let us test first. I got an app. I can see the bandwidth. I do 2 tests. I can figure it out. I know, I'm a geek, but we're all going to get that level of comfortable. And what's with the convention center pricing? So I won't talk about a particular city, although the big mouse ears were there, where I did a session for about 200 people on apps. Now, I'm an app guy, I'm a geek, and I talked to the planner about connectivity for the room. Now, to the planner's fault, they didn't really have that conversation until right before the event. And the night before, I get a call from the planner saying, we can't give you the bandwidth for the room. Why not? It's too expensive. I go, what's it going to cost? $15,000 for 1 hour. I want your heads up about convention center pricing because typically it is controlled by third party. And the smart cities, which aren't, just don't do a great job for what our needs are. Be aware. Flip the conversation around. What are the supplier concerns? I know suppliers are really, really hesitant to talk about this in front of their clients, so I'll do it for you, okay? So number 1, discussing the needs a few days before the event. Oh, by the way, I need connectivity for everyone. Really? Really? And you're talking about it when? You should be talking about it at the point of contract, at least what you know as of this time. What else? Not knowing your history. You got the post-con, you know your room nights, you know your F&B. It should be mandatory that you ask the hotel, what did we use? They have that data. Might be the IT department, it might be the third-party company, but they have it. They can give you the information. They can tell you how much meg was your peak usage. And I'll simplify it into just a few questions in a sec. But they have this. So if you don't know it, you're in trouble. Yeah?
Is that the only way to do this free driveway? How do you know that's true? Or it's accurate?
It has to be a level of trust there. And the bottom line is it's all automated, so unless they're tailoring and playing with it. But if you get a good relationship with the IT person, you can see it during the process. And I've had folks from Marriott who always do a great job on this show me the software. They go, this is what you're using right now, and here's how it spikes up there. So be geeky at that point. I've got to tell you, if you want to be successful in this conversation, don't think you can all learn it yourself. You can't. You got people out there to partner with. The same way you partner with food and beverage and ground transportation, you can partner with the internet. They just don't speak English that well, okay? Just deal with it, okay, fine. The other concern, demanding it for free. Nope. I do not buy the planner should get it for free. Now, some hotels do offer it for free, and hopefully what they're doing is they're integrated into their rate. Because there's a price on this, and you'll see what that is in a second. But I don't buy this, it's like water, everyone should have it. I do buy that, like everything in a hotel and at a center, it's an expense and there's revenue. It means it's negotiable. It doesn't mean that I want, for this meeting, all the internet for free. If you can negotiate it for free, great, but you darn well know that they're probably seeing the value in giving that away, or they're amortizing those costs. And discussing, did I already mention that? Okay, fine, I did. So a couple of major concerns from both parties. So how do we deal with this from a financial standpoint? Well, let's understand this. Now, I put this together. This is not a particular hotel, but this is an aggregate of what I've noticed over the years. And I'm using a fairly large hotel for this conversation, 700 rooms, okay? That over a 3-year period, and by the way, if they're not upgrading every 3 years, that is a hot button too. Technology's changing too fast. So over 3 years, it'll cost them about $750,000 to install and put the hardware. It's a lot of money. And between the annual salary to manage it and benefits and expenses, it is $1 million proposition. That's why it can't be free. Yet, let's look at the flip side. The middle column, the current revenue model, based on 700 rooms, a 70% occupancy, and we are in a high occupancy time right now, at a price of $11 or $12 a night, but only 1 in 4 people paying for it, because you got the loyalty programs where you're getting it for free, and you have other reasons. So only 1 in 4 people means that over those 3 years, they're going to make $1.6 million, a 160% profit. This rivals sleeping rooms. And they're telling you it's not negotiable? Bullshit. I can't say that here. Okay, fine. Now, another thought here on this is maybe, we didn't even say the fact that there's no meeting room revenue in that. That's just sleeping rooms. This is a negotiable entity. Only planners when you do it before you sign the contract. If you're letting this be right before the event, get what you take. However, what about this model? I know some hotels are going to it, where they're putting a fee in there. Now, I know resorts go out of town on this with the $25, $30, $40 a night resort fee, which includes internet and other connectivity. But a hotel that amortizes over $3 a night will make that same profit without having to charge for revenue. I'm sorry? Right in the room rate, absolutely. Any hotels in here, just curious, any hotels that are offering internet for free? What are you doing? Are you doing essentially amortizing it over additional cost for room rate? What do your clients think? Probably big smiles on most of their faces. What a great selling point. You're making the money, and guess what? You're positioning your sales in that city to go, oh yeah, you have to pay for internet there, but ours is free of charge. It really isn't free, but perception's reality, right? I don't ever, ever, ever want to hear you guys say this is not negotiable. It is. However, I side with the supplier oftentimes more than the planner when the planner doesn't provide the data and doesn't do their due diligence. I want the hotels to make profit on this. I don't want them to gouge. I want planners to pay a fair rate. I don't believe they should get it for free. There's balance here. This is not mystical. This is not hoo-ha. This is supply and demand. And hopefully we've cut it down to a couple of questions. Now, we got about 10 more minutes, and what I want to do is first of all mention the fact that if I was doing this right now, I'd be more concerned once I got the basic negotiation done about the speed and the consistency. Because the last thing I want is my boss at the front of the room having the internet fail when he or she's making that closing presentation. That's not job security for you. And you know what? It's going to happen. And it might not be the focus or the effect or the cause of the hotel. So you got to do everything you can to make it as consistent as possible. So here's what you need to ask. We've summed this whole conversation up into a handful of very critical questions that'll make your life a lot easier. Planners, from last year's hotel, go back to them right now and ask the following. First of all, how much bandwidth do we use? Give me a total amount. What was what we used? And which times, places? It can be really simple. A friend of mine who does this for a living as well says the time you're using the most bandwidth is the first 10 minutes of the opening general session. And then everything from there peters down. And I sort of buy that. She's tested this for 15 years. But got a press room, it's going to use a lot of bandwidth. You have a breakout speaker, a geek like me in there, you know it's going to be a lot more. You have an old school presentation, it's going to be less. But find out. So you ask the first question, how much did we use, and how many IP requests did we make? And they will show it to you on an hourly basis. You'll be able to see how much your peak was. You'll know that 10 a.m. on Monday was the busiest time. You might even get the hotel to pump up the bandwidth a little bit to redirect it from an area they're not using it. Boy, you look like a rock star at that point, because you're setting up your group to succeed and you're partnering effectively with the supplier. And again, peak, bandwidth, and IP. I want to know what time, date, event caused the most use. 3 questions. And yes, most, not all, but most hotels keep this data, or I should say most third-party organizations. So you can go back to them 3-6 months later. They shouldn't flush it down the toilet, and if they do, that's another question you need to have. But you should be able to go back the same way you can go back for your room pickup. They have that data. What do we use? Over the course of 2 years, you're going to build history, you're going to see trends, you're going to do the same thing you do with room nights. You're going to be able to have answers, because this is not going to flatline. This is going to keep growing, right? The internet usage is not all of a sudden going to drop down in a couple of years. So if we can see what that trend is, now we can really be proactive without a lot of knowledge. 3 terms is all we talked about here. Now, for the hotel you're considering, my first question is who's managing it? There's essentially 3 options. It could be the hotel themselves. Most hotels shudder when that conversation comes up. But bigger hotels, convention hotels, tend to manage it themselves, and they have a fully functional and excellent IT department. It could be the AV company. Okay, I used to run an AV company. I wouldn't have put it in our hands. And sorry, PSAV does a great job with AV. You know what? I've seen a lot of planners with a lot of problems with them. Part of the issue you got to realize, and this is an AV conversation as well, is that by being in-house for that hotel, they're paying typically 50 to 60% of every dollar they make directly to the hotel. That means all your prices are going up. So again, you darn well better be negotiating this before you get there. Oh, the third one on the who manages, it could be a third party. I think that's the worst. If I had my druthers, I'd rather it be the hotel, because the third party company doesn't get that we're in a 24/7 business. They don't. They go, it's 5 o'clock, time to go. That ain't how it works in our industry. Okay, number 2, how big is the pipeline? How much bandwidth is coming in there? Do you know how much bandwidth is coming to the hotel? Guesstimate? Want to share, or are you not comfortable? Don't know. Okay, every hotel salesperson should know this information. How much bandwidth is coming in? Because ultimately the planners are going to be asking that question. Any hotel person know that for their hotel? Shame, 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 shame. You should. It'll take 1 phone call in the property to get that information. And guess how good you're going to look in the site visit. We have 50 meg coming in. We apportion 25 meg to the guest rooms, 10% for our staff, and there's 25 meg for you to use, through the conference. Wow. What did that take? It probably took one phone call, but you got it. So how big's the pipeline? And then how many concurrent IP requests can you handle and where? I would go straight to the ballroom of the general session and ask that question. Where are your routers? How many can it handle? 300 people coming in, it can handle 300 devices, red flag. 300 people coming in, 600 devices, much more comfortable. And shared or dedicated, we've already sort of gone through this. And I'd want to know the bandwidth dedicated for guest rooms. But bottom line here, I need to know the information that I can share with the hotel. And the hotel needs to know the information that they can share with the planners. This is win-win if we're on the same page. And that age of the pipeline, more than 3 years, probably going to be slower. I've had hotels tell me 2 to 3 years they upgrade. Yep, Dana? For the age of the pipeline? I don't know, because it's different in different size hotels. I would sort of take it from the amount of guest rooms they have divided by the amount of bandwidth they're apportioning it. I'd want to see at least a mega guest room for the free, and then 2 to 5 for the premium. And obviously, the problem that hotels have, and it's a legitimate one, is they're balancing. They don't want to buy all this bandwidth and have it in there and not have it used most of the time. So like your internet service provider, at home, your cable company, whatever, they're always managing how many people do they think is on versus how many people are on. If you're home at a certain hour and you see your internet dip, it's natural. It's more people are on using a fixed amount of space. Ask your app provider, and if it is a web-based app, which means it's not downloadable, that means that it's going to take more internet connectivity. But if you're doing a conference app, that should be a question you ask them. How much bandwidth does this take? And expect that 98% of your attendees will not download the app until 5 minutes before the general session starts. It's not going to happen when they're back in the office using their bandwidth. It's going to be on your dime. Get over it. And how much they recommend. So, I mentioned the IT director. Get him or her involved. It is clearly, as a site visit companion, if you have internet connections, they got the answers. Because if you ask CS or sales, they're just going to have to go, right? You ask IT, so get them involved. Do you? Thank you for doing that. Which hotel? So everyone knows. Holiday Inn Niagara Falls. What a great, great approach. Free plug, right? But you did something really, really good there, and it serves the industry. It serves all of us. And copy them on your technical questions. Hotel sales, CS, is just going to have to get them in the loop, so that conversation makes you a rock star. Ending up, odds and ends here. Your phone. Usable, I'd say as a backup. LTE, I'd give 100 points if anybody can tell me what LTE stands for, because it doesn't make any sense. LTE is that super fast connectivity you get in your phone. It stands for long-term evolution. You'd win a lot of money at a bar if you could answer that question correctly. But the bottom line is you can't count on that for your connectivity. It's sort of a backup. Some of you right now are probably on your phone if you were really bored and checking your email or whatever you might be doing right now. But that's not a solution for Wi-Fi. And then you got the MiFi devices. How many people have that little portable MiFi? Okay, how many people actually use their phone as a hotspot sometimes? Okay, did you know that that can cause problems at the event? True story. St. Louis, I'm not even going to play around with the name. I was at the St. Louis Convention Center, Cervantes Center, a number of years ago. And the Wi-Fi stunk. It was horrible. And so I had to take out my MiFi for my session and use it. And it streamed perfectly and it was great. And 2 minutes after the session ended, AV came storming into the room and started yelling at me. Were you using a Wi-Fi? I go, whoa, back up. I go, yeah, I was. I got pretty indignant. Said, you shouldn't be. And we argued for about 5 minutes at that point. Yes, no, yes, no. And I finally said, why shouldn't I be? He goes, because the MiFi interferes with wireless signal and you knocked out 20 exhibitors' connectivity in the booths right underneath you. Oops. I didn't know that, but great information to know. And in fact, during the session about a year ago, I spoke, and a woman chimed in. She said, you know what, we understand the importance of that, and we walk around with MiFi testers. And if we find any exhibitor using their own MiFi, they are docked a huge amount of points for next year's exhibit, for placement, for all of that. And I mean, she says it's pretty ugly, but they walk around to see what MiFis are out there. Yeah, because what a hotspot does is it converts a cellular signal into a wireless signal. And once it's a wireless signal, it could, not always, but could be on that same frequency. And that's what you don't know. So MiFi, good as a backup? Sure. A strategy for you to have connectivity? No. And if you want to do what that planner did, I'm an Android guy with my phone. I haven't seen a good one on the i products yet, although I know there must be. There is a great app called Wi-Fi Analyzer that allows me to see all the wireless connections. Now, I'll tell you a secret. I use it at home because I can see where my neighbors are on their Wi-Fi, which channel, and I can actually, using my router, move me to another channel to get faster speed. It's good to have a geek in the house, you know? We do some good things sometimes. So the key points in an hour. 3 terms to understand. Bandwidth, IP, digital density. Everything else, from the perspective of what you need to know in our industry, is noise. It's important, but it's not for us to focus on. That's for the geeks to understand. We identified the critical tools, the fact that you can test and should always test bandwidth in a site inspection. And it's only a snapshot of a point of time, but that snapshot is the starting point of a conversation. And then we understand, hopefully, which questions to ask. And that goes from both parties. This is not just about the planners having this information and the suppliers not, or the suppliers having it and the planners not. This needs to be a win-win. I do believe that there's a price point that's fair. I believe it's negotiable. And I believe that negotiation is going to be won by the parties that have the best information and the best communication. You guys are awesome. Enjoy the rest of your day.